You are walking naked across the African savanna. It is 300,000 years ago. No shade, no sunscreen, just a giant ball of plasma trying to cook you. If you took a pale, modern body and dropped it right here, you wouldn't just get a bad sunburn. You would be evolutionarily deleted. For roughly 99% of human history, every single one of your ancestors had dark skin. It was the default factory setting for our entire species, which brings up a rather glaring question. If we all started out black, how did we end up looking like a human paint swatch catalog? Why did some populations lose their dark pigmentation? And what deadly crisis forced our bodies to literally bleach themselves in order to survive? Before we decode this biological mystery, if you enjoy uncovering the weird origins of human bodies, hit subscribe to Primal Mind. Let's start with a number. Natural melanin in very dark skin provides a continuous sun protection factor, or SPF, of about 10 to 15. Can verify. That might not sound like much compared to your Factor 50 beach lotion, but in the prehistoric world, that built-in armor was the difference between life and extinction. You see, skin color wasn't just a cosmetic choice. It was a brutal, invisible biological arms race against the sun. Now, you might think the answer to white skin is obvious. We migrated north, it got cold, we put on heavy clothes, and we simply faded out. Wrong. Evolution doesn't just change things because you put on a sweater. Evolution only makes a major change when not changing means you literally die. Turns out, early humans who moved to Europe actually stayed completely black for tens of thousands of years while living in the freezing cold. The real reason we changed color is much darker. It involves bone-crushing diseases, agriculture, and a desperate, deadly nutrient negotiation. We first need to understand why nature forced us to be black in the first place. Enter the silent killer you've probably never heard of. The sun emits ultraviolet radiation, which is basically nature's invisible death laser. But it's not just your skin it wants to damage. Deep inside your blood vessels, UV rays are actively hunting down a crucial nutrient called folate, also known as vitamin B9. Folate is the fundamental building block for cell division and DNA synthesis. In simple terms, it's the biological glue holding you together. If a pregnant mother's folate is destroyed, her child can be born with severe fatal neural tube defects. Evolution does not like that. In the year 2000, anthropologist Nina Jablonski published a groundbreaking paper connecting the dots. She realized skin color wasn't about sunburns. It was about protecting folate. Jablonski mapped global UV levels and found they perfectly matched indigenous skin colors across the entire planet. To survive the scorching African savanna, our ancestors evolved a heavy-duty biological defense system, an abundance of a dark pigment called eumelanin. Think of melanin as a microscopic lead apron, exactly like the heavy vest the dentist drops on you before taking an X-ray. This pigment sits over your cells like a microscopic umbrella, absorbing and scattering the UV radiation before it can fry the folate in your blood. That is why early humans were universally dark-skinned. It wasn't a cosmetic anomaly, it was the ultimate necessary radiation shield. If you were born with light skin near the equator back then, your folate would be obliterated and your genes wouldn't survive. So, natural selection made a simple rule. Keep the shield thick, keep the skin dark, and keep the babies healthy. It was a flawless system. That is, until a few restless tribes decided to pack up and start walking north. Because as they migrated out of Africa and into the freezing dark winters of Europe, the sun disappeared. And suddenly, that bulletproof melanin armor didn't just stop working. It started actively killing them. Up north, the sun is weak, but that thick melanin armor doesn't know you've moved. It keeps blocking UV rays like a stubborn bouncer. The problem is, your body actually needs a tiny amount of that UV radiation to manufacture something absolutely vital: vitamin D. Think of vitamin D as a biological bouncer of its own. Or more accurately, the only key that unlocks your bones. When you eat calcium, it just floats around uselessly. Vitamin D is what opens the door and lets calcium harden your skeleton. But in prehistoric Europe, wrapped in thick furs during dark winters, our dark-skinned ancestors weren't making nearly enough of it. Without it, their bones couldn't harden. They turned soft, bendy, and weak. A horrific childhood disease known as rickets. Imagine trying to outrun a saber-toothed cat or hunt a mammoth when your leg bones are literally bowing under your own body weight. It wasn't just a cosmetic issue. In the brutal Ice Age, having rubber legs meant you were immediately removed from the gene pool. Evolution was backed into a corner. It had to choose between protecting folate from a sun that wasn't there or preventing the skeleton from collapsing. So, over thousands of generations, natural selection made a brutal, necessary compromise. It turned the melanin dial all the way down. Humans in the north literally had to bleach their own skin just to let enough weak sunlight in to build a working skeleton. Pale skin is essentially a biological desperate measure, a mutant adaptation to starving in the dark. So, case closed, right? You move north, you get pale, end of story. Everyone in ancient Europe was white from the start. Not even close. In 2018, geneticists cracked the DNA of an ancient Britain, and it completely shattered everything we thought we knew. Because it turns out, the final trigger for white skin wasn't just the weather, it was breakfast. In 2018, geneticists analyzed the DNA of Cheddar Man, a hunter-gatherer who lived in England about 10,000 years ago. Based on the freezing, notoriously cloudy British weather, you'd expect him to look like a pale, modern European. But his DNA revealed he had stark blue eyes and very dark brown skin. Evolution hadn't bleached him yet. Why? Because Cheddar Man and his peers were hunter-gatherers. Their diet was absolutely packed with wild game and fatty fish. Fish and liver are basically biological cheat codes. They are overflowing with dietary vitamin D. These humans didn't need the sun. They could afford to keep their protective melanin armor because they were literally eating their vitamin D for dinner. But then, human history took a massive left turn. We invented agriculture. We traded our spears for sickles. Instead of tracking down mammoths and salmon, early Europeans started subsisting almost entirely on wheat, barley, and grain. Here is the catch. Cereal grains have basically zero vitamin D. Farming was the ancient equivalent of living on instant noodles. Calories went way up, but vital nutrients plummeted. Suddenly, the agricultural revolution brought the horrific, bone-crushing rickets back with a vengeance. Stripped of their dietary vitamin D, farmers had to rely completely on the weak northern sun to synthesize it. Evolution hit the panic button. To maximize sunlight absorption, it violently selected for genes that shut down melanin production. Pale skin, as we know it, didn't emerge when we left Africa. It only became widespread a few thousand years ago because of farming. Your pale skin isn't a badge of ancient northern frost. It's an evolutionary band-aid for a terrible prehistoric carbohydrate diet. Which brings us to a rather uncomfortable realization. If skin color is just a biological UV tracker, what does that say about race? To put it bluntly, race, as a biological concept based solely on skin color, is completely meaningless. It's a social illusion. Your skin color doesn't dictate your intelligence, your character, or your worth. It is literally just an ancient geographical sunlight receipt. It only tells us what latitude your ancestors happened to be standing at when the agricultural revolution forced them to adapt or die. Today, you can fly from Nairobi to Norway in a single afternoon. You can swallow vitamin D pills and slather on thick sunscreen. You have effectively hacked the evolutionary system. We no longer rely on our biological paint job to save us from radiation or build our bones. But beneath that incredibly thin, superficial layer of melanin, Whether your dial is turned all the way up or completely shut off, the genetic blueprint underneath is practically identical. Across the entire globe, we are all, fundamentally, the exact same resilient prehistoric survivors. Every single one of us carries the deep legacy of those dark-skinned pioneers who first walked out of the blazing African savanna. Some of us simply received a pale software update so our ancestors could survive a diet of prehistoric wheat in the freezing dark. So the next time you look in the mirror, I want you to look past the surface. Don't just see a color. Look closely and see an evolutionary map. You are looking at a biological diary written by the sun over hundreds of thousands of years. You are wearing the ultimate biological survival suit, perfectly tailored by natural selection to ensure your bloodline didn't go extinct. Remember, human history is constantly rewritten as new DNA evidence emerges. Some evolutionary details are hypotheses that researchers are still hotly debating today. And honestly, that is exactly what makes the scientific journey into our human past so endlessly fascinating and full of surprises. Keep decoding the weird things your primal body still does today. Make sure to subscribe to Primal Mind. See you next time.